About dogs, because I don't think I've actually made a video about dogs yet, and I have a lot to say about them. So, dogs are Canis domesticus, which is an off-branch, a very diverse off-branch of Canis lupus, which is a wolf. At some point, probably somewhere between 30 to 10,000 years ago, that's a pretty big range, but anywhere between 30 to 10,000 years ago, the first dogs were being domesticated. Through simple ways that back then they were wolves and they weren't treated like dogs. They were used, but then they were selectively bred for traits that they wanted, that the people wanted, because they could control the breeding of the dogs. And that's where it's kind of become a separate species now, because this species is no longer a separate, species that thrives on its own or, works for its own cause. In this case, this is like a species that is living in cooperation with another. So, that's really cool. I think we should be able to do that with all species. That would be just cool. Except, plants, but you don't actually have to kill plants to eat them. But so, dogs, at least modern dogs, certainly have a lot of their brain that's been developed for thousands of years towards people and being able to sense things amongst people. Obviously, dogs are pretty good at understanding what is going on, even though they can't understand most of what we're saying. They certainly know some words, like their names, the names of their toys, a bowl or something. They can know hundreds of these kinds of words. Walk, or go, things like that. The dog knows words like that. They understand what they mean. But they don't get the grand scheme of things. If you're talking in great detail about what you're going to do, it might be able to gather that you're going to go somewhere, because not only did you say that you're going to go, but you did some other things that the dog noticed, like you picked up your keys and you put on your shoes and you grabbed your cell phone and, that kind of stuff. And so dogs are really good at being able to sense our feelings. And they can also sense their own feelings, of course, because dogs are social. They can be socializing with other dogs and people. But the group behavior, like a pack of dogs can act different than any of the individual dogs would, because a pack of dogs is more like where the dogs have come into a group and are like, making a hierarchy in the group or something, a friendly hierarchy, like showing dominance and submissiveness like wolves would do. And a pack of dogs will act a lot different than just an individual dog, because even dogs that are dominant or submissive, they still usually submit to their master. That's what dogs generally do. But if you're nice to your dog, then it's like it's your friend. And it's not like really your slave as much, unless you make it do stuff. But what was I going to say originally about this? Yes, it would be good if we could domesticate all animals like this. We've domesticated other animals like dogs too, pigs, cows, and I'm sure there's others. I think goats too, chickens. All of those are domesticated animals that were once taken from animals that existed in the wild and were changed so much to the point where they're just different. But we don't really live in a symbiotic relationship with chickens or cows because we kill them and eat them. I mean, I don't, but a vegan would say that you should just not even do anything with that cow, because you could argue that if you were to keep the cow for a symbiotic relationship, meaning it produces milk for you, and for it, you produce hay and the nutrients and a good amount of grazing space and a retirement space for when the cow can't produce milk anymore. And a vegan would argue that you can't really do that because you have to get the cow pregnant, but that's not actually true. If you use hormones, if you use the exact hormones that are in the cow already, and you can synthesize that molecule exactly, then with no adverse side effects, you should be able to get a cow to start lactating as if it had just had a calf. And of course, if you want this to be not painful for the animal, you want it to be a symbiotic relationship so the animal's not suffering to produce something for you, because then it's more like a slave. You would have to have some young cows, of course. You're going to be reproducing cows anyway so that you'll have more of them. When you're not milking the mothers and they're coming up on the end of their period where they can actually produce milk, then they could get some help from a baby cow, because otherwise it'll become painful and build up in their breast, just like with a human, just to a greater extent. I mean, I've never heard the cow say, oh, or no, but I know that people do. And I'm sure that cows, cows are probably like dogs in a certain sense, that if you see a dog that's in pain, it's not going to yell out at the point that a normal human would. Most humans will yell out given just a decent amount of pain. Some people have a higher pain threshold, but like with a dog or a cow, they will not yell out or make a loud noise unless the pain threshold, their threshold is much higher. I mean, obviously they still feel pain, it's just that they're not have you ever seen your dog do something that looks like it would really hurt, and the dog doesn't start crying, or it can't even do that. It doesn't whimper or anything, unless it really got hurt, and then there's good reason for it to whimper, but even then it's not very much. It's only when a dog is really hurt that it will whimper and cry out like a person would if they got a minor injury that was really painful. But so I'd imagine cows are like that too, and we could live in symbiotic relationships with cows and chickens in the same ways that I was just talking about, which is why I'm not a vegan. I think that that's what we should do. Unfortunately, we don't do that. If that is an option to buy those things, then you should buy those things, but that's only if you care about animals enough to not eat them, and make sure that they're not suffering for producing things that you want from them. That's the most important part. Many dogs, they serve different purposes, but dogs serve a service just like a cow producing milk, or a chicken producing an egg, or a goat producing milk, or, that's what goats are used for sometimes. But, so, usually, dogs are used for many different purposes, and a cow is usually used for a couple of purposes. It can be used for leather, it can be used for meat, it can be used for milk. 1 second. And you can do the same thing with a chicken. I'm sure there's other things you can use in it. There's probably bones you can use. Heck, if you're actually using the animal, then that's much better, but it's still not really necessary, unless you're in a place or in a situation where you cannot afford to not eat meat, which in most places meat costs more than the rest of the food, but some places in America that's not really the case. But if you can afford to, if you don't have to go out and kill an animal to survive, then, and you have easy access to a grocery store or something that's, some miles away, or something that you could drive to or walk to even, then there is absolutely no reason to kill animals unnecessarily. If you have access to all the protein you need, you have peanuts, soy, beans, many different kinds of proteins. There's others I can't think of right now, but you just have to keep your protein up. And that's especially true if you're a vegan, because then you're not getting anything that's an animal product that has protein, like milk and eggs, and of course meat has protein. But you don't have to kill an animal to get the eggs. Some people might not realize that eggs are not fertilized. Most people should realize that eggs are not fertilized, but I've encountered people who don't. It's not like that egg is like a live chicken. I think you can get fertilized eggs, but I'm not sure why. It's basically just a chicken, period, that you're eating. But it's not like a human, period, so it's not really gross. Okay, well, it's kind of gross, but many creatures eat it. It's been so into our traditions. There's many things that you would not be able to eat the same without egg, and you have to admit that. So you should say that you enjoy chicken, period. But there's no life in there. That's just an egg. That's an unfertilized egg, and it's full of protein. And those are the kind of things we should really use chickens for. We should not, like, make them suffer in unreasonable amounts by packing them into tight quarters and producing so many of them, like the meat industry does, that diseases break out. The animals are kept in horrible, torturous, barbaric, like, conditions, and it takes a heavy toll on the environment. I mean, all that like waste from the tons of animals that are slaughtered, that have to be kept in like little confined spaces before they're slaughtered at the slaughterhouses. Like, I'm much happier when I hear someone say, you know, I have a farm full of animals and occasionally I kill one and eat it, and, you know, I don't really like the fact that they kill it and eat it, but that's much better than buying it from the slaughterhouse, because that animal certainly never had a nice farm to graze on or whatever, or almost certainly, unless you specifically buy that kind of meat, but it's probably not very high in demand. So, dogs can be used for many different purposes. I would say that my dog is for morale. He increases my mood, he makes me happier, and in return, actually he does some other things too, of course. I mean, dogs do a few different things, but he's not the kind of dog. He's a beagle, so a beagle and a Jack Russell. When someone comes to the door, he'll start barking, but he's not going to go attack them. And if he knows them, then he'll, you know, get all emotional and start whimpering. And so that dog basically provides with emotional support, primarily, and is like a friend, you know. And then there's other dogs that are more like an employee, like a guard dog, or a police dog, or just a dog that you've trained to use for protection or trained for any specific purpose, because in return you're giving it shelter and food and possibly the ability to mate. So that's useful for those animals evolutionarily, and we can get like many different ways of using them. And I'm sure we could do this with cows too, if we were to think about it, you know. Cows are not as smart as dogs, but I'm sure we could come up with things that would actually be able to make cows more useful. I can't think of any at the moment, but, you know, you could put like some sort of converter on their ass, so every time that they like put out one of those methane farts, you could just convert it into like a... I don't know if you can convert methane into something without burning it, but you could like pressurize it, you know, but that would be like really hard and the machine would get dirty quickly. But you see my point. Even if I can't think of one, I'm sure there's ways you could generate power from cows by like, you know, having them run on treadmills or something. As long as it's not like a slave labor kind of thing where, you know, the cow has a decent time to have fun in its life. It's also working for some purpose. But I don't know, this is just hypothetical, like the way that we've done with dogs. So yeah, that's pretty much all I was going to say. Another animal, though, that has been domesticated is the rat and the mouse, and many other rodents, I think. I can't think of all of them. But there have been domestic mice for a good while because of lab research, probably over 100 years, I don't know. But, you know, you can get domestic mice in less than 100 years. You can catch a wild mouse in 3 or 4 generations of mouse, which is like maybe 5 years for you. The younger ones will be 3 or 4 generations of mice. The youngest ones will be really tame compared to the older ones if you do stuff with them. And even a wild mouse, like if you capture a wild mouse and you like feed it through a cage, it will like bolt at your finger, and then but like a few days later it won't do that. I still wouldn't put my hand in there, but you know, it's not like it's ferocious looking. But the domestic mice are mainly used for feeding, but they make good pets. They do shit a lot and pee a lot. But not rats as much. Like, rats do kind of sometimes, but like my rats knew that we didn't like it when they had to go to the bathroom. on us, and we usually made it to where there was like a paper towel or something they could walk on when I'm holding it. And they pretty much hold their stuff for the most part. Usually you don't even need a paper towel unless it's like an extended period of time for a rat. But for a mouse, it's definitely going all the time. But there are domestic rats, and they are very sweet little creatures too. If you don't believe me, look up videos of domestic rats. You get some really sweet, like, things that are just like as cute as puppies and as friendly as them too, but like less dangerous, you know. Well, more friendly. Puppies don't have razor blades in their mouth like rats do. So that's one thing. If you get bitten by your rat, your pet rat, and it's actually trying to bite you, then it will like sink into your flesh and there will be a scar there because it was such a sharp cut. But normally they don't do that unless like they're in distress or something like that. Sometimes they'll bite at you, but unless they're actually trying to hurt you, it will just like hurt a little bit, but it won't puncture your skin or anything. Of course, if you hold your rat and you domesticate it, and you tame it, that's the word. It's already been domesticated, so you tame the rat. It can be like just as sweet as a dog, really. It can be a very sweet pet, and I'm sure the same is true with a mouse. Well, some of it. I'm sure it can make a great pet. I've had mice before, but I've never really had them like in such a great pet. Like I could hold them, but like they would like crawl around everywhere and like be like too hyper and never staying calm like my rats were somehow able to learn to do, but the mice weren't. But they're both good pets. And they use rats for things too. In some places they actually use rats to sniff out landmines. And, you know, a rat can go over a landmine and it's not going to blow up. And if it does, which it probably won't, I mean, yes, it's sad you have lost your little rat friend, but it's better than, like, a dog or a person, because a rat lives, like, 5 years, or maybe, like, if you're really lucky, 8 years. But a dog can live, like, 10, 20 years, a person, of course, much longer. So it makes sense to use the rats. But they're so light they don't trigger it. They can also use rats for other things that dogs are used for. For example, sniffing out drugs. Rats have more powerful noses than dogs, so they can sniff out drugs and be trained the same as dogs to sniff out drugs. You can actually find videos of this on YouTube too, if you look up drug rat or uses for domestic rats or something like that. But so yeah, this is getting to be a long video. And I was originally talking about dogs, but then I started talking about domesticated animals of all kinds. So I'm going to start it, like I'm going to stop it. I don't know why I said start. Darn it.